Awesome.
All right. Okay, cool. Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the 1% Better podcast slash video stream. It's kind of it's not just a podcast anymore. It's a few different forms of media going on. And in this one, I'm delighted to welcome and introduce my guest from all the way from LA, Melissa McCarty. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to join you.
Great to have you along. So I'm really looking forward to learning a bit more about you and sharing that with the audience here in Ireland, in Europe, and obviously I have some good listenerships from the US as well. So looking forward to digging into that. You have a book or a memoir that's just been recently released as well. So definitely want to kind of get into that story, and I suppose as we go through your journey, pull out some interesting piece of information. The purpose of the episode of the show is to try and help people improve as well. So if there are certain things you've learned along your way that have been pivotal for your success or for your own development, somebody might get something out of that. So, feel free to share whatever crops up.
Definitely, I will. I'm excited. I have this framed. It's the book cover. If you can see, it's The Making of a Crime Reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about this at some point, but it's very symbolic. That's me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a crime reporter, and that's actually my real life brother. And so it's a very compelling, a lot of my employers said a little provocative.
Yeah.
But no, it's just something that I've never really been public about, is my relationship with my brother, because obviously the contrast is pretty dramatic, and he's tattooed from head to toe. He has 5150 tattooed on the side of his forehead, on the side of his head, which is the California Police Code for mentally insane. And the book is about addiction and mental illness, which it has double meaning. It's obviously crime reporter. He was in a gang lifestyle growing up, but it really is a book about loving someone who is struggling with addiction and mental illness. And I think who doesn't know someone struggling with one or the other or both?
Yeah, I know in Ireland this week it's Mental Health Awareness Week. I don't know if that's an international week, but it's probably timely that, we're going to talk a good bit about that. But maybe just talk a little bit more about you, Melissa, your career, your job. What do you do for a living? And then we can maybe go back in time a little bit.
Well, I started off as a local newscaster, and I worked my way up, staying at each television station for about a year and a half. And so I would move state to state and kind of earning your stripes. Television news is actually one of the industries that you really can't fudge. I mean, I think in other industries of television, you can, if you have the right agent or have the right manager, or a certain person, or if you're dating someone, then you can, get booked. But news, I have to be honest, you have to earn your stripes the proper way. And so it's a very tough journey. So you have to start in small towns like population 50,000, which I did in Grand Junction, Colorado, which I talk about in the book. And then you work your way up to Los Angeles, where I was the top story newscaster for CBS in LA for 5 years. And then I ended up joining Crime Watch Daily with Chris Hansen, which in the US, he's a crime legend. He's the How to Catch a Predator guy,
Okay.
kind of like, what are you doing with this 13-year-old girl? Have a seat. So he's legendary in the crime world. So he was the host and I was the correspondent. We traveled the country. And we just, highlighted certain tragedies and unsolved cases. And we would actually confront the people accused of murder that were walking free.
And were you recording, or what, that live shows on Crime Watch Daily? It's something that we probably wouldn't get here in Ireland, but just to talk a little bit about it, is a live show, is it pre-recorded or?
Yeah, so it's pre-recorded and it's available on YouTube, where we actually, Facebook and YouTube, we get the most views in the millions. And so it really is compelling, but it's live to tape. And so we do these very in-depth Oprah Winfrey style one-on-one interviews of, extracting like this major life-altering moment that happened to this family or this person. And then a lot of them are unsolved or unresolved. So for example, people don't like to think about this, but I think it's fascinating as a true crime person. There's thousands, tens of thousands of murderers walking free and amongst us for various reasons. So we had a really wonderful team of private investigators and researchers, and we would find the people accused. Sometimes police couldn't even find these people, and we would go and pay them a visit, you know, on behalf of the families, law enforcement, them, to see if they're, you know, what they feel about the accusations. So it was just real life, true crime stories that I've been doing for over a decade.
Wow, very good. And what was it about kind of crime or reporting on crime stories that was the draw? And maybe talk to me about why that area.
It's so interesting because I have a lot of journalism students reach out to me, and I used to make a lot of speeches at colleges and so forth of the journalists of tomorrow. And I really do go heavily into the book about the journey of television as well. But I just wanted to be, the next Diane Sawyer, and I wanted to be this amazing world trusted newscaster. I didn't realize a lot of that within the industry is crime.
Okay.
And so once you become a newscaster, the headlines that dominate, it's crime. You do human interest stories and politics, but it's mostly crime. And then it's just something I was drawn to because of the way I grew up. It was a really tough environment, and my brother hung around criminals. I honestly grew up with a bunch of criminals. And so I always thought I had a unique perspective because I know what went through the minds of these criminal-like behaviors. I knew why a lot of the ones that I knew did what they did, the reasons for it. And then I would see in the news industry the victims, the other side. And I've been on the other end of that. I've been the person grieving a loved one, you know, knowing the person who was accused of killing someone, and just like every aspect, I could understand it and see it. So I thought I had a unique perspective on being the storyteller. And I just, like you, I wanted to know what pushes people to that threshold. Why does that person snap and not control their emotional rage? And the other person doesn't. What's the difference between someone committing a horrible act to those who want to but don't, or someone who never even think of it? It's fascinating.
Did you start to identify kind of patterns emerging from some of the, I suppose, the criminals that you were following over a period of time? Did you start to kind of identify or categorize almost certain folks into buckets?
I think, and I mean, we're talking about, you know, mothers and, young men, older women. It's just, there's no category of what a killer is. I found there is no profile that I think that you can paint. It's all ages, from all backgrounds and all situations. And I feel like it comes down to, in that moment, feeling desperation. You know, they felt like they had no choice. It was a self-control and impulse problem. It was, some emotional issues that I'm sure you can link back further in their childhood to their young adult years. I think it's like this instability of how to handle things in life and their emotional state. So when something happens in the moment, they just react. And obviously drugs and alcohol play a role for some of these as well. But I really think it's just tapping into that impulse control and people who can't do it. I think that's the difference.
Impulse control is something I actually talk about a good bit on the show as well, because it's one of the key components, I guess, of emotional intelligence, and it is something you can actually develop and strengthen. It's like like a muscle over time. It's just it's a fascinating area, not only in criminals but in business, because people sometimes have the impulsiveness to make the wrong decision or to fire somebody or whatever. And it's an interesting area. Is there an element of danger in what you were doing? Was there a draw towards that? Was there an excitement, adrenaline? How did all that play out for you?
100%. It's so funny because, and I go into all of this also for people that are into crime and television in the book. So I made a name for myself as a local newscaster as the girl that gets too close. I've been caught on fire, covering wildfires in Southern California, made national news. I've been reporting in gunfire. I was attacked in a riot and had glass shattered all over me. I've always, I've been in gang territory every night reporting. I've always kind of thrived off of the adrenaline. And, there are times that Southern California is notorious for our wildfires, unfortunately. And we would be on the fire lines, and I'm the only one, I think, ever in history to be reporting live in an actual massive ember storm. And it was dangerous, and no one could believe their eyes, and I was getting pinched and singed. But it was just the adrenaline. Like I had to show people what I was seeing, and I didn't want to flee to safety, But then when I became a national correspondent, and I was actually sent out to truly engage with these accused violent criminals or people with clean records, no record whatsoever, but accused of murdering a loved one. Okay. I had to travel with a bodyguard, armed to do such a thing legally, because they're accused of murder. I needed a bodyguard. And I found that I was scared a lot. And that was never me, but also, I was growing older. I was out of my 20s and I'm in my 30s, and I'm just starting to see how easy violence is. And what happens when a person feels like their back's up against a wall, it's so unpredictable. And I was always thinking, what if this is the moment the accused killer I'm about to confront is going to say, well, I'm caught, so I'm going out with a bang, Yeah. And I have a lot of friends who are officers, and, they pull people over and they feel like the jig is up and I'm going out guns blazing. And so you think like that. But you know what? I've never been harmed. I mean, obviously, I think someone tried to spit on me once and they'll threaten to harm me, but I've never actually been harmed because I'm with a crew, I'm with a bodyguard, and we are very cautious to say, okay, we're leaving, we don't want any trouble, but we still want to get the answers as well. So I am scared, but it's controlling the emotions in that moment.
And would there be an element, the fact that you're on camera, you're recording stuff, that the potential criminal realizes, okay, I can't do much here because if I do anything, it's going to be all caught on film as well. So.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes they don't even care, It's just like out of my face. But no, I just want to be cautious also legally. I don't want to be in a mind state of fear and say something that's accusatory, not fair, because they are walking free. Family members think they killed the person, but, they're not charged because there's not enough evidence. So you have to be fair. And even though I've looked at the evidence and whoever I may or may not privately be leaning towards, you have to give the person their due process and approach them with some kind of empathy so they want to say, hey, I'm innocent. And I've had people look at me and say, I'm innocent, I didn't do it. And who knows, these are still cases unresolved, but it's compelling television.
Sure. Oh, very, very interesting. It's fascinating to hear. And as you're talking through it, I'm trying to imagine myself in your situation, and I suppose it's impossible unless I'm there. Like, I can detect the real passion for the work you do from reading and doing a bit of research. It said you were a high school dropout to a crime reporter, right? So talk to me about how you got from there to what you do now, because obviously you have a lot of skills and you've obviously worked really hard to get there. I'd love to hear that story without spoiling too much. People want to buy the book, obviously, but tell me a little bit about that.
Well, there's such a wonderful story that I used to be embarrassed of, and now I'm not. I'm so proud. I wish I could shout it from the rooftops. But when I was like the top story news reporter in Los Angeles covering Southern California, KCBS, KCAL, there's this one moment where I was assigned to cover a prom. It was kind of like a nonprofit, and they were giving a lot of the at-risk teens like dresses and makeovers for prom. And I was in Compton, I believe. And I was just, commenting to my assignment editor and my producer, I'm so excited. I've never actually been to a prom. I'm really excited to cover this story. And he was just like, well, yes, you have. That's impossible. Of course you've been to a prom. And it just flew out of my mouth because I'd been there for years at the time at CBS. So I just looked at him and I was like, no, I've never been to prom. I dropped out. And he was like, what? And I said, I'm a high school dropout. I never got to go to prom. And he said, that's impossible. I said, no, I'm a high school dropout. And he said, and he was just thinking, like, trying to make sense of it. And he was, because all of my colleagues were from like UCLA, Cal Berkeley, USC. So he was like, how are you here?
Right.
How are you here right now? And not, and he was like fumbling his words and I said, a statistic? And he said, yes. How are you here and not a statistic? And that's what's important about the journey and sharing a story. And I don't share a story that's personal just to share it.
Sure.
It's because at the age of 19, I, at that time, had 2 friends that were murdered. One friend accused of killing another friend.
Oh.
And another friend of ours. So it was 3 people involved in a murder case. Okay. 2 had died. And then on my 19th birthday, I tell a story where I threw a big party. I was living in North Oakland. Oakland was the murder capital of the country at the time. And I didn't realize people would hear the music and come on in off the streets and wander in. And of course, I didn't have any security. I was 19. And a fight broke out. My brother and his gang member friends were there. And someone ended up stabbing the aggressor. Multiple times. And I honestly don't even know if the guy survived. All of the kids just kind of scattered. And so I was in this situation where a lot of people, it's an extreme situation, obviously, but all of us are in a situation where we wake up and we hate our environment. We don't like the situation we're in. We want better for ourselves. We want more. And, I was also a high school dropout. And I was going to a little junior college at the time in Oakland. Right. And, a junior college, it's a stepping stone to get into a 4-year. Sure. And, because if you're a high school dropout, no college is going to accept you except for a junior college. And so you really have to make an effort to even graduate from college, being a high school dropout, because you put yourself back so far from dropping out. And I just, there's, I guess, 3 aspects to it, right? You are not going to settle and rationalize your situation. You're going to be defiant and push the boundaries and want more for yourself. 1. 2, what's it take? Courage. It's the unknown. It's, will I make it? Will I succeed? And at the time, everyone was laughing at the thought of me in that situation at 19, wanting to be a newscaster. People, they were literally laughing. And then it's courage. And then it's just the day-to-day carrying out the operational side. And I'm a big believer in like lists and planning. And so every single day I would wake up and make a list. How do I get to point A to point B to point C to accomplish the goal of the day, of the week, of the year? Okay. So even though I just got my first television job, in Grand Junction, Colorado as a newscaster, I'm already planning the next step.
No, it's so much comes up for me there as you're kind of talking through that planning. My background is project management, and I believe absolutely if you have a very planful approach of setting goals and breaking it down bit by bit, you will get there. Courage is one of the, I suppose, core values that I talk about as well. To take that chance or to push yourself outside the comfort zone. What other kind of values or motivators had you that kept pushing you to that next level? Where did it come from, I guess? Where do these things come from out of you?
I'm not saying this is good and it's for everybody, but for me, because I was raised in such a rough environment, I didn't know anyone who went to college or even wanted to go to college. My environment was truly so suppressive and hopeless, that I was at a situation where I was so miserable thinking, I don't want to be you. I was looking at my brother. I don't want to fall down that hole, and he was deep in addiction and trying to figure out some early signs of mental illness in his head, self-medicating, completely self-destructing. And just my friends at the time, I was just, for some reason, I was just so turned off. Well, there's a stabbing on my 19th birthday. I think with most people, unfortunately, it has to take a major event, a major incident to happen to us, to our loved ones, or someone we know, to kind of wake up and make a move. And so it was a major event that triggered it, severe unhappiness, and seeing others that had different lives. So even though I was a dropout in junior college, I was smart enough to do an internship, which opened my eyes to people my age without my background and my situation. And that's when I had a little bit of envy. And that's when I started to get a little defiant around everyone who said, that's a crazy idea. Really, a newscaster? And it was a little bit of anger for the people telling me I can't do it. And it was a little bit of, I'll show you. That really pushed me. And I mean, think about how many civil movements have taken place in this country and around the world out of defiance. We're not going to take it anymore. Look at what's happening today with the Kavanaugh. And it's just a little bit of defiance and unsettled anger that kind of pushes you to go further than you normally would. That's a good thing. As long as you don't let your anger consume you, so you don't enjoy the process.
Very interesting. And obviously confidence must have something to do with it, or a self-belief that you can do it. If you're looking around and your friends and your brother and your surroundings are not in a positive place, but to have the ability to rise above it. So was that something that was very pivotal to you? Because you come across confident. There's certainly no arrogance or anything like that, and I believe there certainly fine lines, but where did that come from, do you think? Was that always there as well?
No, I was so insecure, and I talk about that too in the book, because a lot of people, once I was in television, especially a lot of men, which men dominate the industry of news, they would really try and break my spirit and say things to really mess with my head and my confidence. But also they were stereotyping. They thought I came from money. They thought, I just was given an easy ride in life. From looking at me, they were stereotyping, and I was from Los Angeles. And so they thought something of me that was not true. If they only knew what I was really trying to overcome and deal with. But what it was, is I was smart enough, even though I dropped out of high school, to find a passion for being in front of the camera. And I thought, well, I just kind of clicked with it, and the storytelling, and I was a poet growing up. I loved words. And so I was just taking these classes in junior college, and I was just doing things that I loved, wanting a certain path, not knowing how it would play out. But then I was lucky enough to have instructors see something in me and see my work ethic, how hard I tried, how I went above and beyond the typical student. And I just had a knack and a true calling for putting a story together. And it was really one or two professors that encouraged me and pushed me along the way to give me the confidence to say, whoa, I can do this, and I'm going to do it. So it was a little bit of faith in myself, but then thankfully there was one or two people along the way that saw something in me and pushed me.
Cool. Influencers are always very important. Question that came up for me as we're talking through it, when you were moving up the ranks, was there, now you're open and honest about your background and your past and happy to share your story and help others learn from it, right? Was there stages during that journey that you didn't want to talk about it, or you were afraid if a potential employer knew about your background or your brother or whatever, that they'd have a negative view on you as a result?
Oh, I was embarrassed most of my life. And now it's just, it's ridiculous now that I think back. And But I mean, it's a process for everyone. I think when you feel like you're the underdog, and there are times, obviously, where I'm in an editorial meeting with people who come from money or come from Ivy League schools, and they're bragging about what school they went to. And there was a few of those incidents where it's like, well, I went to Cal Berkeley and I went here, and then it's kind of like, yeah, but I'm sitting right next to you and I'm a dropout, so who cares? We're all here. We all made it here. It's the path is and the fight, I think, is what sets you apart and makes you unique. And I wouldn't want everything to be handed to me, and I wouldn't want to walk an easy path. I think that's boring, and I'm drawn to people who have overcome obstacles and barriers. But I was always embarrassed and afraid of being kind of figured out, and didn't want anyone to know. And that's why I was so shocked. I blurted it out to my boss that day at CBS. But then I think because I was so good at what I do, that it was just instant kind of respect. And
Cool.
then the aspect about my brother, because he does kind of look scary to society. My brother looks like someone that my colleagues would say is like a thug or like a criminal. And he did have those ties, and he was affiliated. That was his lifestyle, but that wasn't his heart. And it's important for me to explain, he had that crowd. He looks very scary, but he only harmed himself. It was, self-destruction from addiction and mental illness. Now, he did have friends that harmed others. But it's always kind of like when you're two white kids or just two teens trying to make your way in really rough situations, you walk the walk and talk the talk just to survive this situation, right? And so I used to be embarrassed a little bit about him and people, seeing him, and even today when I walk around and I show people this, people that have known me for years, they literally, because I don't really talk about it and he lives in a different state, they literally are shocked and go, that's your brother? And I can still see the response from people. They're stunned. And it's because of that, and knowing that and anticipating that, where I wasn't always comfortable. But now I'm just like, absolutely, that's him. He has a big heart. He's the most loving person. If he has 25 cents, he'll give you 10, and it's important that people destigmatize.
Sure.
And even though someone may look like someone you want to step away from, sit down and talk to him. See where his head is at, where his heart is at. I'm sure it's exactly where yours is. He wants the same things everyone else does,
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm just thinking the book cover, don't judge a book by its cover, has multiple meanings there, right? Because you're looking at the contrast between you and your brother. You're talking about how different or how you shouldn't be making judgments there. As you decided or started to think about putting a memoir together, maybe talk to me about when you decided, well, that's what I'm going to do, and how involved was your brother even in the process, or was he on board with it?
We've always talked about this our whole lives. He came up with the title. He said, I want it to be called Backyard Tears. He was always aware that him and I, he and I had very abnormal circumstances to the way we were raised, and at the time we didn't know it. All of our friends were around living that same lifestyle. But once I started to meet other people, as did he, we realized it wasn't really a normal upbringing. It wasn't a healthy, positive upbringing. It was more of a struggle and in darkness. So we always knew that we had an interesting story to tell. And then when he realized that he was bipolar and ADHD and had severe issues with anxiety attacks, social phobias, that's when he started to realize all these years I thought I was crazy, and he just wanted to just take his own life at one point because it was so much that he wanted a story told to help others so they wouldn't have to suffer. So the goal was always young people, always at youth, teens, and people who were lost and trying to find their ways, because he and I think unnecessarily suffered from our own ignorance, lack of education, communication, And it was always a plan to do this to help other people learn about mental illness, the severity of addiction. And I watched A Star is Born the other day, and the way they depicted alcoholism was so powerful, and I felt such a heavy weight on my shoulders to not only portray what it's like for the addict and the person loving the addict going through severe addiction, but also mental illness. Mariah Carey made a comment in People magazine a while ago saying she suffered from manic moments. And I thought, wow, I wish she went into detail about that. I do. In the book, I explain what a manic episode looks like. And there's the movie Silver Lining Playbook. It's just, what does that mean? And instead of talking about mental illness and saying, he has manic episodes, what's that mean? I wish I knew when I was growing up so I can pin it, and maybe a lot of the self-destruction, he caused to himself or our family and the heartache, maybe it would have been lessened if we knew the signs earlier,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, I talk to a lot of people on the show about mental illness. And even when I was growing up in school, everybody was in the same class, even though there was certainly 10% of the people in there that might have had ADHD or Asperger's, or there wasn't just a name for it, and they were treated the same when they shouldn't have been, and I guess we're moved along a lot since then. But anything you can do, or I can do, or anyone can do to share the stories around what those episodes are really like, can only be, a positive thing for sure.
I think the stigmas are starting to weaken, and I think unfortunately, especially in the US, we cater to celebrities a little too much, and we put too much weight on them. However, when one of them, like Demi Lovato or Ben Affleck, is so public about bipolar, mental illness, addiction, it really does help destigmatize those things. And so when you have a loved one or a friend that you see suffering, you can talk about it more so, like, hey, have you ever thought to get checked out for this? Or do you think maybe your emotional state is something, along the lines of maybe bipolar? Or, it's just a conversation that, we should be talking about and we should be addressing, and whoever brings awareness to it, I just want to do my part, I just want to do my part, because as a reporter, and it's so horrible to even have headlines like this, but I covered a lot of stories. Well, they didn't make air, but I would show up to a call, and, suicides don't end up on television unless it's very significant, for some reason.
Okay.
And because it's also something you don't want to promote and put out there, just like you don't mention the name of gang members or their gang, because you don't want to put attention to it.
Sure.
But there were a lot of calls I went out to of young people taking their own lives. And then when you dig into it, it was mental illness or being bullied. Things that I think if they only had an outlet, someone to talk to, or information, they would be alive today.
Absolutely. Have you always been able to have that outlet and, recognize and be aware of your own stuff going on in your head? I talk about the voice inside the head and how it can sabotage people's happiness or prevent them from doing things. I certainly have had a struggle with it from the point of view of, a few years ago, I wouldn't have had the confidence to even do this. And by doing it, you kind of build up a strength against it. So that sort of stuff, is there anything that holds you back, and how do you face that and push through?
Oh boy, you nailed it. By the way, really good book, The Untethered Soul. But no, racing, I suffer severely. I just did an Insta story post last night on racing thoughts. I talk about it a lot. I'm listening to Paul McKenna, this professional. Yeah, Paul McKenna.
No, Paul McKenna, he's English. Yeah.
And, I have severe rapid racing thoughts, and it's really troublesome. And also it makes me so good at what I do when I do focus on something. But I think my own thoughts and, my headspace is both, I think it's a motivator, but it's also a setback because it can really get the best of you if you don't rationalize it. And there's times where I have to kind of talk out loud to push certain negative thoughts and focus on the positive, and I can do this and I will do this, I'm capable of doing this, and to ease your mind. But I think our worst enemy is ourselves.
Sure.
The things that we say to ourselves silently and the things that we allow ourselves to think. And I think you should, talk about that as much as possible, because how strong is our mind? I think we can cure certain ailments within ourselves if we work out what's going on in our own heads and what we say and treat ourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I believe, I believe we all have that voice. I was just editing an episode that I'm putting out in a couple of days, one of my shorter podcasts with a very famous rugby player, and he's very into mental strength, and he's even mentioned a couple of times where, he's had bad games because of the voice inside the head. So no, I think the more we talk about that, definitely the better. So talk to me a little bit about the process of putting the book together. Was that something, it was a first time for you to do it? How did that play out? Was it a challenge? Was there a lot of learnings about yourself even during it?
Well, I self-published, I think, because it's best to have the rights to your own material. And it's more rewarding when you actually can follow the sales and see the whole process once you put it out there to the world. And so it's an ebook and Audible. So this is new to me, narrating my own book. Boy, that was such a weird experience. I'm a professional narrator. I narrate the stories that I do for television, and I voice them. And so I'm writing the material for this memoir. And then Crime Watch Daily, so gracious of them, I use their audio booth to do the voice recordings with a wonderful technician. So it's just me, the technician, in an audio booth for days and hours. And I'm reading my own story, my own words. And it was such a vulnerable, weird feeling for me, because you relive it more so when you're writing it, because it's in the universe. And so there were times, once or twice in the Audible, where you can hear that I'm choking up.
Wow.
And there was a really traumatic thing that happened, and my voice is cracking and I'm choking up. And I thought, should I redo that? Should I revoice that chapter? And I decided to leave it in because it was just so real and authentic. And for all these years later to be choked up talking about that incident, that's, I think, what will connect people to my story. Then hopefully it's really the purpose is really for them to resonate and find something in my story that will relate to their story. And I've tested it out. I've had people from CEOs of television companies to a supermodel, to an actor, to a writer, to, a bodyguard, I've had everyone, kind of sample this, and they've all had major takeaways that they resonated with and related to in their own lives, whether it's the alcoholism, the mental illness, trying to live a happy life when you have a sibling that just wants to stay in darkness. It's whether it's overcoming obstacles, it's relatable, and it was worth it. But it's also just the narrating portion where you're like, oh, I hope people like my voice and like the story. And it's a kind of a head trip that, once again, you have to get out of your own head. You have to believe in the material and say, this is good, it's important, and you do it.
That's funny to bring it back to the headpiece again. And I bet what will happen to you, what I hear about podcasts, when some people ask me which episode I like the most or whatever, and then you hear random stuff coming back from somebody listened to an episode and a thing that they took the most out of, I didn't think much about at all. So there's probably so many parts in the book that you might even feel, yeah, that's important, but not the big thing that other people will just latch on to, which will be really great, I suppose, when you hear that feedback.
That's amazing. And I've had people do that, what you just said. It's they point out something and they mention something and you're like, really? That's what
That's the
stood out
peak.
to you.
Yeah.
So amazing about it. And it's you look at that person and you just, in that moment, you saw something in them that you didn't see before because of what they related to.
Yeah.
And it's a different kind of connection. That's what's so awesome. And I've had people reach out to me already about it. And this one person said I, on social media, they just said, I'm a high school dropout. I was incarcerated twice, and I have a family member that's a severe addict, and my life was hopeless. But now I am the head supervisor of blah, 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 blah. I made it, and I'm going to keep climbing. And so it was just those moments. Oh, that's all. I just want to, just contribute and connect and share. And if you and I can vibe off of overcoming things, then I think that's a good life.
It's brilliant, and it's out there now, and it's it's always going to be there. So people probably in 15 years' time might find it, and something might stand out for them. So that's the beautiful thing, I think, about putting content that is real out there as well. So well done on it. So what's a typical day for Melissa now? What's going on in your world at the moment, and what are the plans in the near future?
So Crime Watch Daily with Chris Hansen, we were canceled after 3 wonderful seasons, won an Emmy, super proud of that.
Wow.
I'm now developing my own docu-series that we are going to take to network soon on elder abuse.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of people reach out to me about converting the making of a crime reporter into a film. And that's the ultimate goal. I'm always going to stay in television and stay in true crime. I'm talking in networks right now, but I think that if you talk about end game, it's to make a film based on this book or events of the book, and just have that withstand time, and really go hard on the mental illness and addiction. I bring up A Star Is Born. I just saw it. It really moved me. And that is something, it'll be around forever. It's a beautiful film about addiction. I think I have a beautiful, compelling, dramatic book about addiction and mental illness. And if I can just take elements of that and make it bigger and bigger and louder, that's the end game.
Brilliant. Yeah. And you talked about setting goals earlier. So I think there's a lot of importance in having an end game and working towards it. But again, going back to the voice, don't let it give you a hard time if you're not accelerating like at a light speed to get there, bit by bit, right? I think that's certainly an important
Shut
approach.
It out. Yeah, shut it out. Yeah.
But you mentioned that the picture on the cover as well. How long ago was that taken? Was that something that was taken way back or recently, or?
This was recent, actually. We did this, my brother and I. We just, he's in Michigan right now. I went to visit the family. I grabbed a camera. We went to a dark alley, and I had my cousin snap some photos. I'm holding a microphone, and at first, some of the people I ran the cover by in the industry, they said, "Well, it looks like he's a criminal that's gonna harm you or something." And I said, "Exactly. Of course it does, but." They're going to the look is the look, his look and my look, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first judgment and assumption, but then they're going to read about it or listen to the audible and realize, oh my God, that's her brother. And it will be viewed as differently than literally judging a book by its cover. So I mean, I love that you think that it's a criminal and a crime reporter. It has much more deep symbolic meaning once you realize that that's not the case.
No, it looks really good. And as I said, I'll definitely I have a page on the website that I put book recommendations on. So I'll put it there. Hopefully when we put out the video, folks can see the cover and listen to it through the podcast. We have lots of angles to share it. I do mention books a lot as well, and I like to kind of wrap up with a couple of final questions around books that have had an impact on you outside your own. Is there anyone that you could potentially recommend, or one that stuck out for you that you took a lot of influence from?
Well, the reason why I wrote my book, the number one reason which pushed me to say, I can do this, I can tell my story, I think I've got something, it's the Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, which was made into a film
Okay.
with Woody Allen or Woody Harrelson.
Okay.
It was that book that it was so profound about a journalist and the situation she overcame with her family and her upbringing. I love memoirs. But now I'm more on the space of what you focus on, internal growth and strength and mind control. And so The Untethered Soul blew me away. Eckhart Tolle, anything by him, anything. And so I just really want to strengthen my spirit and my thoughts to continue to do what I do, especially working in such a dark, sad industry. I like to shed light into my brain. So that's where I'm at, is more of the mental strengthening books. But memoirs are my addiction.
Okay, cool. And one last one, like just get you to visualize into the near future, the making of the movie. Who's going to play you and who's going to play your brother? Have you characters lined up or actors?
I do. I can't say because between you and I, the person that I think is best qualified to play the brother, which is such a complex, difficult character, he's my ex-boyfriend.
Okay. So maybe you play you.
Yeah, okay. He doesn't know he's a chapter in the book either. He's listening to it. He'll find out soon enough. But no, but he's so gifted. He's a big actor, and I'd be honored if he would. And me, I don't know. Someone younger and hotter. I'm old.
I'm sure. Look, at least as you said, visualize it. Put it out there, see what happens. It sounds like you have a good story certainly a great story to tell, and you know people there hopefully that pick it up, and all I can say is best of luck with that. It's only been out a couple of weeks, right? So it's still going to take a little bit of time. So no, it's been great to have the opportunity to connect with you, Melissa. I hope it goes really well for you. Keep doing what you're doing. Looking forward to kind of keeping an eye on your progress over the coming weeks and months. And just to wrap up, how can people get in touch with you, and how can they get the book?
Social media is the best. It's Melissa McCarty and the number 1, both on Twitter, Instagram, and the book's on Amazon, Audible, iTunes. You are such a pleasure. I love what you're doing. I think it's so thought-provoking and great. So I'll be listening to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Great to do this video as well. So look, have a great rest of day and keep in touch.